This lesson is all about React class components. So we know about functional components. We're going to shift gears and talk about classes in React. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain what class components are and use a class component to render some JSX to the screen. So what is a class component? The class components in React are no different than the JavaScript classes that you already know. You've already been working with components and classes in JavaScript. Maybe you didn't know that you were working in specific components, but now we are going to be shifting gears from that knowledge and just simply applying it to the React ecosystem. There are a few bits of nuance here and there, but nothing that isn't super easy to understand and overcome based on the knowledge that you already have of React or of vanilla JavaScript class components. So what we do when we use base or class components in React is we actually extend the base class that React gives us. So straight out of the box with the React library, there is this base component class that we extend to create all of our classes in React. This base class will give us a whole bunch of awesome functionality. There's a few nuances to it. It's not very complicated to understand how to work with it right out of the box based on our knowledge of classes already. But there are some kind of tricks and things that this base class gives us from React. Class components will have access to new tidbits of the React API and the React lifecycle. We will talk about these things at length. Right now, all you need to know is that there are a couple of new things that we will learn based on our knowledge of classes. The first thing that we will learn about for sure is the render function. Now, this function is very important. It is how our classes actually work. It's how React takes our code and pipes it through the React virtual DOM and the React engine, and then uses that code to create DOM elements. Everything that we return from here on out within our React applications will go through this render function, okay? And most importantly, our class components can hold state or data that our application needs to work with and needs to run. So what does a class component look like? Essentially, it's not much different than any components that you have already been working with. We start by declaring our class. We say class app, and then, of course, like I mentioned, extends React.Component. React.Component, the capital C component from React, is the base class that gives us the functionality that we need to work within the React ecosystem. That is when we are working with class components. So we start by extending the React base component called capital C component. Okay, and then notice here, instead of returning some JSX out of the gate, we use the built-in render method. So this method comes to us from the base component class from React. Okay, so this is how we now have to kind of wrap up our JSX. Before we return it, it's the render function that will be called, and when that render function returns, it will return out some JSX for us. The rest is all the same. Notice that we have JSX on the screen with an outer div that wraps two children in H1 and H2, hello code sandbox, and start editing to see some magic happen, right? All of that is JSX, and we already know all about that. Okay, so now I mentioned earlier the most important thing to know about a React class is that we can hold on to some state. So let's talk about state as we already know about it a little bit, but we're going to review these major topics and move on from there. So state is a component level storage object that we can use to hold on to some data that we can give to the rest of our application. State can be and should be set up on the constructor function, okay? So you will see documentation where there is no constructor function inside of class components, and that is fine. knowing how to work with the constructor function will help you in understanding that later on when you get to that type of development. Okay. For now, everything's going to live inside that constructor method. We can create, read, delete, and update state. So it's an object that we have the ability to manipulate, to change its properties and hold on to those. When state updates, so will the render get called again. So when we originally mount our component, render gets invoked as a function from our class component, and it returns some JSX. When state changes, that render function gets called again. This is what gives React its reactive ability. Another rule is that we can pass state around as props throughout multiple levels of our components. You already know how to pass props around and pass data around as props. Now we're just going to store that data on state. And then when that state updates, so too will the props. So that's the next rule. When state that has been passed around changes, the props change too. So this is what's super cool about React, is that you bind everything up through your components, through your state, and then when state changes, any of the props that are associated with that state will be re-rendered on the screen. This is what makes React reactive. This is where React gets its name. So what does this look like within a class component? Our same component that we had before has changed in one slight way. We have declared constructor, and we of course call super. We call super, of course, because we are extending a component. So anytime you have a constructor inside of a class component, if you are extending a component or some class that's higher up, then you need to call super. So that's just a rule of JavaScript of the super class. That way, what you can have is access to that parent class's methods. So we can call things like render, okay? And then we declare this.state on the constructor, setting it equal to an object. And this object will become the heart of our application. Everything we do from here on out in React will live on state, whether that be in this component or when we talk about libraries like Redux, everything is going to be revolving around state. So it's very important that you become very comfortable with this idea right away. So now that we kind of know about these things, let's actually dive into some code and start playing around with some examples. Notice that I've navigated to this website, codesandbox.io. Okay, I want you all to go there and kind of try and follow along with me at this through this example. Okay, when you go to codesandbox.io, you will see this really cool animation, kind of the background here. This is an online code editor that I will be using to teach you React for the next few weeks. So no longer will I be giving my lessons inside of an HTML file. I will be inside of Code Sandbox teaching you, and you will be able to follow along with me. This tool is so powerful, and I can't overstate its power. It is really, really amazing. So go ahead and create a sandbox, and by clicking on that, you'll be directed to this page right here. Okay, new sandbox, and then you have a variety of options you can choose from. First, I want you to sign in with GitHub. Okay. It's very important that you sign in with GitHub here because this is how you can, there's so many tools that you can use that we will keep discovering along the way. But the first tool is that you integrate with your GitHub account. So if you go and do the OAuth and sign in with GitHub, you should have your little GitHub, avatar show up in the corner that promotes that you're signed in. You can save up to 50 sandboxes at a time, and you can always go in and delete previous sandboxes that you make. So go ahead and click on React, and you will be directed to a code sandbox that looks more or less like this. Notice that we have a plain vanilla JavaScript function that is a functional component, like you already know how to build. If you wanted to change this, you could drop the function keyword and do const app equals parentheses, arrow function, and you'd be off to a start very similar to the way that you already know. Okay. For now, I already have a code sandbox up and running, so I don't need to make a new one. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to have you pause the video and make sure that your code sandbox looks like this. Okay. So pause your screen, go ahead and make your code sandbox look like this, and we will be off to the races playing around with our state and our data, and we're going to walk through a demonstration of why React is so powerful. Okay. The reason that my theme kind of looks a little different is because Code Sandbox recently added the ability to write or to put your own themes that you have from your VS Code editor into Code Sandbox. So you can kind of follow their little tutorial here. You can go and you can choose different themes. So if you notice, I just selected a theme and it turned to a different style. I'm going to keep my theme in this nice Cobalt 2 theme. And that's pretty much the theme that we're going to be working with and working in so that we keep things consistent. Okay. Okay, so after you've created this and you're up to speed at this point in the video, we have gone through a few steps here that if you follow along inside of Training Kit, you would have done this same thing. But there's a few quick rules that I want you to remember, or a mnemonic device that'll help you remember how to create a class component in React. The first rule is the C in CC&R. So C is declare your class. I'll just all caps that, okay? So we declared a class called app, okay? And it extends React.Component. And remember, this mnemonic device will be CCR, one of my favorite bands of all time, Creedence Clearwater Revival, okay? The next step in creating a class component is the C, the second C in CC&R, which is to build out your constructor. So CC&R, constructor function. And then the last part is the R, which is don't forget to call render. As soon as you have those three steps put together, you can create any class in React that is a component that extends the base React.Component. Okay. Some caveats to some of this that we're going through right now is you'll see oftentimes this syntax where instead of seeing React.Component, people will choose to pull in component from React in this way. So it's very important that you kind of understand the distinction there, is that you'll see this happen often where we pull in component and declare it from React as a non-default object, okay? React being the default object since it's not in curly braces. So this is just another object from the React package ecosystem. So you'll see this all the time. For our course, I don't care which way you choose, but for me, I'm going to write all my components like this, just so that you always remember that this capital C component comes from React, okay? All right, the next thing that we're going to do together is we're going to put a property on our state object that we're going to read from inside of our JSX. Okay, so remember I said you can create, read, and update and delete your state? Well, we are going to read the name property, and I'm just going to set it equal to my name. Yours can be set to your name. And notice that as I'm saving things, we're getting, well, right now we're kind of getting some errors, I guess. I'm not authorized. Interesting. Well, I guess I'm not authorized to my own Code Sandbox, but what's going to happen is what I'll do is I will change this hello Code Sandbox. Instead of saying Code Sandbox right here, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to say this.state.name. Notice this is what we're referencing. It won't let me save my app. But if I go and refresh my little fake browser here, you'll see that my changes happen right here in my little browser. Okay? So I want to make sure you have all done this exercise, and then I want you to go back through the content that's found in this objective in Training Kit and walk yourself through building your first class component from scratch, hopefully without looking at or copying and pasting any code. So go ahead and jump right into that material, and you will be guided to a really fun project that will help you understand the ability to work with class components. And we are going to really hit home this idea of state in the future. So in coming lessons, you will learn how to work with this state, how to update it, how to respond to events, how to change your state and things like that. because if this were to change right here, so too would my DOM, and I don't have to do anything. I just have to make sure that I bind everything up properly. So go and have fun, and we will talk to you soon.